Welcome to the WellFuel Podcast, your spot for everything gut health, hormones, detox, healthy living, anti-aging, cancer prevention, and everything in between. I'm Isabel Smith, and I'm your host, and I'm an integrative registered dietitian and founder of Isabel Smith Nutrition. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the WellFuel Podcast. This is Isabel, and I'm your host, and today we are going to be talking about the long-awaited conversation regarding nicotine and long COVID and my experience with it and all the in-between pieces. You guys are following along on Instagram and were watching me drop tiny bits and pieces of information about my nicotine patch journey and wondering what I was doing, why I was doing it. So to give some backstory on why I jumped into this protocol, I've probably had Lyme and a lot of the co-infections for most of my life, but it was after I got COVID the first time that things really came to the surface and I had to really dive in and treat. Babesia in particular. After I got COVID, I remained tremendously anxious, which is not really a me thing. Night sweats, insomnia, exhaustion, like utter exhaustion. And so I sought out a long COVID specialist who also does Lyme disease, and I ended up down the rabbit hole of Lyme, Bartonella, Babesia, relapsing fever, because turns out my tests were positive for all of these things, and I was symptomatic. So I did about 2 years of antibiotic and herbal treatment, and then since last May, I've been able to be off of. I've gotten a lot better. There have been other things I've worked on, but the bottom line is that I'm 90% better, but I know I can feel better. So in a recent meeting, we discussed the fact that I had had COVID as a stimulator for a lot of the stuff that we ended up treating, and it might be worth seeing if we could help reduce my viral load, spike protein load, by doing a nicotine patch sort of challenge, if you will. And the background on the nicotine patch, just for you guys who are out there wondering, I'm going to keep it super simple, but the long and the short of it is that nicotine or COVID can hang on to the ACE2 receptors, and nicotine has a greater affinity for the receptor and can bump spike protein off, meaning that you end up having spike protein that was sitting on the receptor now free floating, which means you end up having to deal with higher viral load and thereby for many people some more symptoms, and also can experience some freeing of long COVID symptoms by moving this protein out of your body. So for some people, this process goes super swimmingly and is super simple. For me, no surprise, it was not. So if we're wondering, like, where are these receptors that we're talking about? They're involved with the nervous system, our nose, our lungs, central nervous system, immune cells, which can contribute to the sort of symptomatic loss of smell, shortness of breath, chronic fatigue, dizziness, neurological issues, low functioning immune system, which is why there can be such a tight relationship between where the COVID sits in these receptors and then freeing it up to create a little bit more space. So I guess way back when in 2020, they were finding that smokers had a lower incidence of COVID-19 and lower incidence of long COVID. So these processes began to be sort of researched and a more like worked on and ascertained for benefit. And it's not 100%, nothing is 100%. But while I was doing it, people were like, wow, I had such positive experience with this. And they were commenting on the drips and drops and the bits and pieces. So the long and the short of it is you work up to a 7.5 milligram patch. And what you do there is you're supposed to replace it daily over a week and then stop. So it's a pretty short protocol. It's really supposed to be sort of like a couple of weeks to a month or 2 months long kind of maximum. For me, it took closer to that 2-month mark because I had to work up really slowly. I'm very sensitive. And it turns out that once I started doing probably like 1 to 2 milligrams, at first I was like, wow, my brain fog is amazing. And I feel like just like a little bit stimulated, which from a person who was on ADD meds for so long, such a delicious feeling. Maybe this is going to be my long-term experience. Well, not so fast, Kemosabe. Unsurprising. My body found other things to dig out of the back corner, and I started having a ton of symptoms. I'm going to read you an excerpt from my symptom log. I do keep a symptom log, and if you don't keep one and you have stuff going on, you really should, because it's really helpful. So let's see. I'm scrolling back to my notes. So I started on March 17th. So I had been having Here we are. I'm just following my symptom journal. So I am even wowed by my own symptom journal as I read through it, honestly, because I don't remember anything unless I write it down. So to rewind, I had started the ramp up process to getting onto the nicotine patch about a month and a half prior. So I started lumbrokinase. I started nattokinase. I started what else did I take? I took vitamin E, I took L-theanine, and all these things have very specific roles in sort of the overall process. And lumbrokinase is a fibrinolytic. That's a mouthful. And what it does is it's a protease, which helps to break down. It's sort of like a cell wall metabolizer, biofilm disruptor. Vitamin E plays a key role in the Krebs cycle. So basically, it is a super helper in the major metabolic pathway that helps us produce energy. So we're basically charging the mitochondria before we do this process. Mitochondrial optimizer with PQQ. This one didn't feel so good. I've had trouble with really high doses of B6 over time. And again, I'm just walking you guys through what I started about a month prior to. But I also, was taking some of the other things like PQQ and the arlopoic acid, which is really important. Again, just like helping with mitochondrial support, energy, etc. And L-theanine helps to prevent upregulation of receptors so that you can easily come off the nicotine. And I will tell you, I'll fast forward to the end of the story. It was very easy for me to come off the nicotine, and I was shocked about it. I thought I was going to have to really down dose, and I did not. So I started the lumbrokinase, and I got really tons of symptoms. I had to take some ABART. So the Bartonella started to flare. I have ABART here. I took some Bartcor, really helpful. My sleep was really affected. Hello, Babesia. Tons of brain fog, and the joint pain was insane. So I was having low-grade headaches throughout the entire process. I was having to take ABART consistently through the whole month leading up to, which was really interesting. And finally, I was like, screw it. I'm just going to hop into this nicotine patch and see how I do. So I started maybe 3 milligrams. I think it was less, to be honest, but I have this written here. And I got really swollen lymph nodes. So one of the things that I felt when I'd wake up in the morning was like this feeling that I'd been in a smoky bar, which I'd spent a lot of time in college. And I had definitely not been around any kind of smoke. And I really felt that. That was major. I was exhausted. My HRV plummeted. My HRV is not great anyway, but my HRV plummeted. I was so tired, and I was having so much like mental overwhelm. Granted, we also did introduce a puppy at this time, but whatever, all the things. And I was having so much trouble fitting into my clothes. That was happening again. That hadn't happened in a long time. So my lymphatic system was super full. My lymph nodes were super full. I was also getting these crazy body pimples, which is not really a thing for me. The really interesting thing is that I'm feeling my back as I do this right now. For about a year, since I got off the antibiotics a year ago, I've had this like really like weird congestion issue on my back, and it's like totally gone. That I think was due to the work I did on my testosterone, which was creeping up, which is why I was having those breast cysts, which is a separate conversation. It's been a colorful couple of months. However, I got these like huge pussy, sorry, there's so many descriptors here, pussy pimples, like as if my body was purging something when I was on this protocol. So I was able to work up. I was like so frustrated sort of with where I was and not feeling well. I just like kind of kept pushing it. Didn't make things worse, but I was able to climb up over a month to, let's see, to 7.5, probably 3 to 4 weeks after starting. I had to support the Babesia now along the way, which remember back to 2022 didn't pop up until recently. I was having so much muscle soreness and tightness. I could barely exercise again, was like so like feeling like I couldn't fit in my clothes. I was taking creatine. I was taking collagen. I was taking zinc. I was bumping up my protein levels. It was really, I had the worst period I've ever had while I was doing this. No surprise. Like I couldn't get any relief from the cramps. It was insane. My notes here also say my lips were very chapped. My lips are still very chapped, which is an interesting aside. And like my knees hurt, which really haven't been a super thing for me, but it was, I guess, at this point. So terrible soaking night sweats appeared kind of 3 weeks into, which led me to get a new T-lab on a different form of Babesia, which unfortunately is positive. So I think this sort of dug that out. So finally I hit a plateau, got to 7.5 milligrams, hit a plateau with symptoms and said, I think I'm good here. And basically over about 3 days, I was able to just pull back and stop. And I felt great. I still feel much better. I did end up with a mouthful of canker sores, which was really interesting, which again is totally viral. So I leaned more into my viral support. And I was like very quickly able to clear my lymphatic system, which wink, wink, we're going to record a separate podcast on that in a minute or two. Whenever I finish here. But I was so puffy and then it went away. So what was amazing is that I was able to get through this protocol. It dug up a ton of stuff. This was probably the most painful 8 weeks that I've had throughout my entire Lyme process, to be totally honest. From the mental overwhelm to the just like blocked brain. It wasn't that I couldn't recall, it just I was so maxed capacity like 100% of the time, which is not something I generally feel. And then had these night sweats and then had this whole circulating, rotating chaos of just crazy new symptoms. Beautiful thing is when I stopped the nicotine, it kind of all quieted down, but we ran an M-spike protein sort of inflammatory panel, and I have fairly high inflammatory markers related to what they're saying is long COVID. And then also have this T-lab positive Babesia. So it's a bit of a colorful place for me to be at the moment. That's okay. We'll get through it. And the next step of the journey, I'm not totally sure of yet, but we're going to work on it. So it was definitely a useful protocol. I'm going to start to incorporate it in the practice. We're going to go nice and slow, and it's going to totally depend on the person. But it was really powerful and extremely helpful. And I know it can be helpful for other people. So this is definitely something that we're going to be working on, because we do work with a lot of clients with chronic fatigue, long COVID, exhaustion, sort of, symptoms. And I think it's a really important one. And I think it can just create space and help to boost the immune system. So one of the things I found the most helpful that I've done alongside is actually, I restarted my transfer factor immune. This is not sponsored, but I take transfer factor immune. This boosts natural killer cells. And of course it's got shiitake and maitake, and that's always positive. And that really made a huge difference. Other things I did is I really leaned into my viral support, which is always really helpful. I'm just looking at what things I have on my desk here. Boosted my inflammatory support, so leaned into my vitamin C. I'm still maintaining my Babesia herbs until I sort out what exactly we're doing with this Babesia, whether we're treating it or whether I'm just herbally supporting it. And we'll see sort of how that goes. But you can see sort of behind the scenes, I do this with our patients, but I also do this with myself. I do have practitioners who help me. And I'm going to continue to be taking this spike support supplement. Again, not sponsored by the wellness company, which is Natto. Actually got 2 new supplements. I'm excited to start from them, called like Energy Rebuilder or Energy Optimizer. And then as well, I'm going to do a spike detox protocol that they have too. And what's interesting is I've had to lean on the adrenal side of things for a really long time. And I'm wondering more if it's just mitochondropathy, which is tired mitochondria. I am pretty hung on PQQ and CoQ10. It really helps me, but I also have not been able to get off of my adrenal rebuilder supplement, and I'm hoping to be able to do that by leaning into this kind of stuff. So I just wanted to give you a sneak peek into what I'm doing, what we're doing here at the practice. I often do things on myself before I do them on patients so that I really know how it feels and things to expect and blind spots. But this is definitely something that was, I think, really impactful. It was very painful, but I always know that when I start something, if it's painful, it's because there's a problem that needs to be addressed. And where there's no noise, there's often no problem. So I hope this was insightful. And as always, we'd love to hear what you guys want to hear here. And we will see you next time right here on the WellFuel Podcast. As always, thanks so much for listening to the WellFuel Podcast. We're so happy to have you. To make sure you don't miss a beat, please subscribe either on Apple or Spotify because we have tons of great content. If you want to make sure that you're up to date on everything we're doing in the business with our clients and new offers and all the things, make sure that you check us out at Isabel Smith Nutrition on Instagram and isabelsmithnutrition.com. See you guys soon.